Welcome back to NovelNest Audio. In the previous episode, Klein continued adapting to life as a newly awakened seer while serving alongside the Nighthawks. As he trained under Old Neil and explored divination, troubling questions about the deaths of Welch and Naya resurfaced. And as strange coincidences began pointing once again toward the mysterious Antigonus notebook, Klein realized the deeper he stepped into mysticism, the more dangerous the truth might become. Now, let us continue. Episode 9: The Seer's First Field Test. Chapter 41: Audrey and the Curious Incident with Susie. Klein climbed the staircase leading from the underground armory toward the offices of the Blackthorn Security Company. His footsteps echoed softly against the silent basement walls. Moments earlier, he had poured away his coffee and collected a thick bundle of historical records and mysticism notes from Old Neil. Now he carried them carefully as he made his way upstairs. After 2 days inside the building, Klein already had a decent sense of its layout. The entrance opened into a spacious reception hall filled with sofas and tables for visitors. Beyond a partition lay the inner corridor, lined with offices used by the Nighthawks and their civilian staff. Everything inside carried the quiet discipline of an organization used to secrecy. On the left side of the corridor were 3 rooms. The nearest belonged to Mrs. Oriana, who handled the team's accounts. Next came a small restroom containing several sofa beds for exhausted members returning from night shifts. At the end of the hallway stood the staircase leading back down to the underground facilities. The rooms on the right side served different purposes. Captain Dunn Smith's office stood closest to the entrance. Next to it was the civilian staff office, where a typewriter sat on one of the desks. At the far end was a recreation room used by official Nighthawk members. Klein had once seen Leonard Mitchell inside that room, laughing while playing cards with 2 teammates. The game looked identical to one Klein recognized from his old world. Here, however, it had a different name, something inspired by the Empire's traditions. Despite the new name, the rules seemed exactly the same. When Klein entered the civilian staff office, it was empty. Brett had earned the right to sleep after finishing a night shift. Roseanne was stationed at the reception desk, and the driver responsible for errands had already gone out for supplies. The room contained 3 desks. Only one of them held anything of note, the typewriter. Klein stepped closer, studying the mechanical metal parts with quiet fascination. Its mechanical complexity carried a strange kind of elegance. After preparing himself, Klein began typing. At first, his mind instinctively converted the local language into the habits of his old life. But over time, the memories he inherited from the body's original owner became easier to use. Soon, the rhythm of metal keys striking paper filled the room. The sound formed a mechanical melody. Tap after tap, Klein completed a formal request for expenses. When he finished typing, he didn't immediately bring it to Dunn Smith. Instead, he settled into studying the mysticism materials Old Neil had given him. The documents were partly review and partly new knowledge. He read them with careful concentration. Hours passed quietly. By the time noon approached, he finally stretched his stiff neck and gathered his papers. Only then did he bring the expense request to Dunn Smith's office. He knocked gently before entering. Dunn was seated inside, waiting for his lunch delivery. Dunn Smith studies the document. "Did Old Neil show you how to write this request?" Klein answers without hesitation. "Yes, he explained the process." Dunn picked up a dark red fountain pen and signed the application. He explained that he was already preparing funding requests for the coming months. Adding Klein's request would be simple. Dunn Smith gives instructions. "When the funds are approved, collect the money from Mrs. Oriana. Then you can prepare your spirit pendulum." Klein nods. "Understood." Before leaving, Klein asked a question that had been nagging him. Why was the budget request for July only being submitted in July? Shouldn't it have been done earlier? For a few seconds, Dunn said nothing. He calmly took a sip of coffee. Then he gave a simple explanation. Dunn Smith replies, "We handled 3 cases last month. I was too busy and forgot." Klein instantly realized he had asked the wrong person for a logical answer. He forced a polite chuckle, then he quickly left the office. From that point onward, Klein settled into a stable routine. Every morning began with half an hour of meditation. Afterwards came 2 hours of mysticism lessons and another session studying historical records. His days followed a disciplined rhythm. After lunch, he would rest briefly in the break room. Later, he practiced drawing bullets before heading to the shooting club. When his training ended, he often walked past Welch's residence before returning home. By choosing longer routes, he avoided paying carriage fares. In those walks, Klein practiced his spirit vision and dowsing abilities. Sometimes he bought groceries along the way. Life moved quietly forward.
Elsewhere, in a private laboratory filled with chemical instruments, a tall blonde girl stood alone beside a glass cup. Audrey examined the bubbling liquid inside the container. After a few moments, the mixture thickened into a shimmering silver substance. Her eyes sparkled with excitement. Audrey whispers to herself, "I actually succeeded on my first attempt. I even prepared extra materials in case I failed." Carefully, she stored the remaining ingredients she had borrowed from her family's vault. Then she raised the silver potion. She was just about to drink it. A dog barked outside the laboratory. Audrey frowned immediately. With quick reflexes, she hid the potion in a dark corner. Audrey opens the door and speaks. "Susie, who's there?" The golden retriever wagged its tail happily. A maid named Annie appeared at the end of the hallway. Audrey addresses the maid. "I asked not to be disturbed while I'm working on experiments." Annie explains the reason. "There's an invitation from Duchess Della. She's hosting afternoon tea and a literature gathering." Audrey paused. The event involved an esteemed baker from the royal palace, but Audrey had no interest in social gatherings today. Audrey gives instructions. "Tell my mother I'm unwell. I may have a headache from the heat. Please send my apologies." Annie adds more information. "It isn't just tea, it's also a literature salon." Audrey refuses. "That won't cure my dizziness. I need rest." Deep down, Audrey considered a backup plan. If her family insisted on attending, she would simply faint on the spot. Her etiquette teacher had taught her how to perform that perfectly. Satisfied with the excuse, Annie finally left. Audrey hurried back toward the laboratory, but when she reached the door, something felt wrong. Susie was gone, and the laboratory door was slightly open. Audrey suddenly remembered something, the door handle. Susie had learned how to open it. A faint clinking sound came from inside. Audrey rushed into the room. Glass cups lay shattered across the floor. The silver potion was gone, and Susie was happily licking the final drop from the ground. Audrey stood motionless at the doorway. Her mind went completely blank. Susie sits and looks at Audrey. The dog wags its tail as if nothing unusual has happened. Far away, beyond the stormy waters near Pritz Harbor, an isolated island stood beneath constant thunderclouds. At its harbor rested an ancient sailing vessel. A tall blonde man wearing robes decorated with lightning symbols faced Alger Wilson. He seemed puzzled. The man asked Alger, "You could have returned to the kingdom and become a captain or even a bishop. Why choose a life at sea?" Alger answered without hesitation, "The ocean belongs to the storm. This is the Lord's domain. I will remain here and guard his kingdom." The man struck his chest in a salute. "May the storm guide you." Alger returned the gesture. "May the storm guide you." Soon afterward, Alger stood on the deck with his sailors. He watched as his former companions disappeared into the distance. Quietly, he murmured something to himself. They could never understand. Not yet. Back in the laboratory, panic had forced Audrey to act quickly. She prepared another batch of the potion using the spare materials. To her relief, the liquid formed exactly as before. Her eyes nearly filled with tears. Without hesitation, she lifted the cup and drank the potion. Friday arrived. A violent storm swept across the city of Tingen. Rain hammered against every window. Inside the Blackthorn Security Company, Klein sat in the reception hall with Roseanne and Brett. They were eating lunch together. Since the office only had a kettle, reheating leftovers wasn't possible, so Klein began ordering meals with the others from a nearby restaurant. A waiter came every morning to collect their orders. Klein always chose the cheapest meal. It included bread, a small portion of meat, vegetable soup, and a bit of butter, just enough to fill his stomach. Roseanne speaks while eating. "Only one night watch is on duty today." Brett responds, "I heard there's a cult-related investigation in Golden Indus. The police requested 2 night watches for assistance." Klein quietly dipped his bread into the remaining meat gravy. He said nothing. Underneath his sleeve, a silver chain with a topaz pendulum rested at his wrist. A knock nodded at the half-closed door. Roseanne calls out, "Please come in." The door opened. A tall man wearing a half-top hat stepped inside. Rainwater dripped from his shoulder. The stranger speaks. "Is this the former mercenary group?" Roseanne answers politely, "You could describe us that way." The man cleared his throat. Then he delivered his request. The visitor announces, "I have a mission that requires your help." Outside, the storm continued to rage. The rain struck the windows in steady waves, and within the quiet office, a new case had just begun.
Chapter 42. The Butler Named Klein. The man standing at the entrance had asked for a mission. For a brief moment, Klein had to restrain the urge to comment sarcastically. The sign outside the building claimed it was a security company, but most of the time it barely handled ordinary jobs. Still, Klein remembered the captain once explaining that if they had free time, they could accept outside work to earn additional funds for the team. Roseanne's eyes shifted as she considered the situation. The storm outside rattled the windows while rain beat steadily against the street. For a moment, she hesitated, calculating what to say. Then she answered the visitor. Roseanne explains the situation. "Our security personnel are currently out on assignments. The earliest they might return is in about an hour. If your matter isn't urgent, you may wait and discuss it with them." Among the 6 official members of the team, none were present. Captain Dunn Smith had been summoned to the cathedral by the bishop for a discussion. Leonard Mitchell was currently guarding the sealed gate deep underground. Other members had already left to assist the police in an investigation tied to suspicious criminal activity. 2 night watches had traveled to Golden Indus Borough to help examine a robbery that hinted at a cult involvement. Another member was on leave. One had gone to patrol the cemetery outside the city. As for the remaining 2, Old Neil rarely accepted field work due to his frail condition, while Klein was still too inexperienced. When the visitor heard this explanation, his shoulders drooped. Rainwater dripped from the umbrella in his hand as his expression darkened. After a brief bow, he apologized and turned to leave. Roseanne watched him disappear into the rain. She sighed heavily. Another possible commission had slipped away. Klein finished the last of his lunch and set down his utensils. Even though he disliked the soup made from vegetables and turnips, he had still emptied the bowl. Then he spoke casually. "There's nothing we can do. Someone always needs to guard the sealed gate, unless you want Brett to take the job, or yourself." Roseanne rolled her eyes before laughing. Then she glanced toward Klein mischievously. Without thinking, she blurted out something that made her immediately freeze. "Brett wouldn't manage it, but our Mr. Seer could." The moment the words left her mouth, Roseanne realized her mistake. Her hand flew to her lips. If someone outside had heard the mention of Beyonders, it would be a serious breach of secrecy. She hurriedly looked toward the door. Fortunately, no one seemed to be nearby. Relieved, she stuck out her tongue in a childish gesture. "Good thing the captain isn't here, otherwise I'd have to confess again." Klein and Brett burst into laughter. Afterwards, the 3 of them cleared the dishes from the small lunch. The storm outside continued without mercy. Since he hadn't brought an umbrella, Klein decided to remain inside the building. He picked up a newspaper and settled onto the soft sofa in the reception hall. The pages rustled as he scanned the day's headlines. One article mentioned a new airship route connecting two distant regions. Another announced the upcoming release of a famous detective's collected works. An advertisement promoted revolvers and firearms with surprisingly precise prices. Then one particular report caught Klein's attention. He stopped turning the pages. His gaze remained fixed on the column. The article reported that the suspect behind the murders of Welch and Naya had been arrested. Authorities claimed the case had been resolved. The victim's family had already transported Welch's body to his hometown for burial. Klein read the article several times. A quiet sigh escaped his lips. It appeared Welch's father had accepted the police explanation without pursuing further investigation. Losing a child must bring immensible grief, but Klein couldn't help comparing it to his own parents' pain. They had also lost their only son. For a long while, Klein remained seated without moving. He didn't feel surprised that he wasn't invited to the funeral. Instead, he silently decided that someday he would visit the graves and leave flowers. Just as he prepared to head toward the break room for a short rest, someone knocked on the door again. The sound echoed clearly through the quiet hall. Roseanne jolted awake from her drowsiness. "Please come in." The door opened. Standing there once again was the same lanky man who had left earlier. "May I wait here? Your security personnel should return eventually, correct?" Roseanne gestured toward the sofa. She allowed him to sit and dry himself from the rain. Klein looked at the man with interest. The visitor had already searched the city through the storm and still came back here. That level of persistence meant something serious was happening. "How did you hear about this place? Who recommended you?" The man managed a tired smile. His clothes were still damp from traveling through the rain. Klein explains, "I've visited every security company and private investigator nearby. They're all overloaded with work. If not for the restaurant waiter who delivers food here, I wouldn't even have known another company existed." Klein blinked in surprise. This explanation was very different from what he had imagined. Roseanne leaned forward curiously. "Are they really that busy?" The man sighed before answering. He mentioned a recent armed burglary and murder that had shaken the city. Since that brutal crime, wealthy families across the city have grown frightened. Many have hired additional guards and detectives. As a result, every security company is overloaded with work. Klein exchanged a glance with Roseanne, and they both smiled awkwardly. The entire industry was booming, yet their own company had barely seen any benefit. More than 20 minutes passed. The rain outside began to weaken. Klein was preparing to leave for shooting practice when someone suddenly emerged from behind the inner partition. A man with black hair and striking green eyes stepped into the room. It was Leonard Mitchell.
Leonard asks, "And this gentleman is?" Roseanne brightened immediately. She quickly explained the situation. Roseanne asks, "The captain has returned?" The visitor looked startled. He had been watching the entrance the entire time. No one had walked through the door. Roseanne froze for a moment before forcing a laugh. Roseanne explains, "As a security company, we don't rely only on the front door." The visitor nodded as if that made perfect sense. Leonard casually sat down across from him. Leonard introduces himself. "I'm one of the security personnel here. May I ask your name and what assistance you require?" The man straightened his posture and organized his thoughts. Klein explained the situation. "My name is Klein. I serve as the butler to Mr. Vickroy, a tobacco merchant. This morning, his only son, Elliot, was kidnapped." The groom grew quiet. Even the rain outside seemed distant. Klein continued, "We have already contacted the police, and the case has been given high priority. But Mr. Vickroy still hopes to use the channels and knowledge your organization has to investigate from another angle." Then Klein mentioned the reward. "If you can locate where the kidnappers are hiding, Mr. Vickroy will pay £100. If you can safely rescue young Elliot, the reward will double." Leonard leaned back slightly with a faint smile. His eyes studied the butler carefully. Leonard commented, "So, your employer mainly wants us to find the kidnappers' hideout.
Otherwise, he wouldn't think his son is worth only 100 pounds. Klein shook his head and explained calmly, "My employer is not extremely wealthy. Besides, he believes the police will be more capable when it comes to rescuing the child." Leonard snapped his fingers lightly. A faint smile appeared on his face. Leonard agreed. "Very well, that arrangement is acceptable." He turned towards Roseanne. "My lovely lady, please prepare the contract." Roseanne rolled her eyes at his theatrical manner. "Stop pretending to be a poet. All you do is quote other people's work." She walked into the office and began typing. Soon the rhythmic sound of the typewriter filled the room. Klein watched the process with mixed feelings. The company didn't even have a standard contract template. The entire operation felt terribly unprofessional. Despite that, the contract was quickly prepared. Leonard and Klein both signed it. After the official stamp was added, the agreement was finalized. Klein stood up and bowed politely. "I will await your good news." Leonard remained silent for several seconds. Then suddenly he turned his head towards Klein. "I need your help." Klein blinked in confusion. "Me?" Leonard nodded with amusement. "You and I will handle this mission. I'm good at combat and tracking, but locating people isn't my strength, and old Neil certainly won't run around in this weather." Klein hesitated for a moment. Part of him felt cautious around Leonard. Another part felt excited to test his newly awakened abilities. Klein accepted. "All right, I'll help." A faint sense of anticipation stirred within him. This would be the first real chance to test the abilities he had recently gained. Outside, the storm slowly weakened, but a new search had already begun, and somewhere in the city, a missing child waited to be found.
Chapter 43. Following the Trail. Leonard looked toward Klein with a faint smile. He already understood what kind of help a seer would require. Divination rarely worked without a connection to the person being searched for, and that meant Klein would need something belonging to the missing boy. Leonard asks, "Do you need anything from them before we begin?" Klein paused briefly to consider what would work best. The medium needed to be personal enough to form a spiritual link, but it also needed to be something ordinary, something that wouldn't raise suspicion. Then he turned toward the butler. Klein explains his request. "I'll need something the boy recently wore, preferably clothes that haven't been washed yet. If there's an accessory he carried with him, that would help as well." Klein frowned slightly at the strange request. He didn't immediately understand why such things were necessary. After a moment, he added another option. Klein responds, "I do have a photograph of young Master Elliot with me." For a moment, Klein struggled to answer. The real explanation involved mystical divination, but revealing that would violate the secrecy surrounding Beyonders. Before Klein had to invent something awkward, Leonard spoke up smoothly. He wore a casual smile as he stepped into the conversation. Leonard explains, "My partner keeps a rather unusual pet. Its sense of smell is sharper than a hunting dog's. If we give it something Elliot wore, it can track the scent and guide us toward the general area." Leonard then gestured casually toward the photograph. Leonard adds, "We'll still need the photo as well. It helps if we know what the boy looks like." Klein slowly nodded. The explanation sounded reasonable enough. He then asked where they preferred to collect the items, wait here or travel directly to his employer's residence. Klein replies, "Let's go together. It will save time." Klein agreed immediately. The carriage waiting outside would take them there. Before leaving, Klein handed over the photograph. It showed a young boy standing alone. Elliot appeared to be about 10 years old, with hair that nearly covered his eyes and freckles scattered across his cheeks. Klein studied the image carefully. Then he slipped the photograph into his pocket. Taking his cane and hat, he followed Leonard and Klein outside into the rain. The carriage waiting below was spacious and lined with thick carpeting. A small table inside allowed passengers to place their belongings. As the vehicle began rolling through rain-soaked streets, none of the three men spoke. The only sound was the rhythmic splash of wheels cutting through puddles. Eventually, Leonard broke the silence with a light remark. "The driver handles the carriage well." Klein answered without enthusiasm. "Yes." Klein forced a faint smile from across the seat. "He'll be glad to hear that praise. We should arrive shortly."
To avoid alerting the kidnappers, the carriage did not stop directly at the Viceroy residence. Instead, it halted on a nearby street. Klein stepped out under an umbrella and hurried away. After several minutes, Leonard leaned closer to Klein. "My guess about that mysterious notebook wasn't random. I believe it will appear again sooner or later." Klein subtly gestured toward the carriage driver outside. "That prediction isn't exactly comforting." Leonard understood the signal and fell silent. Rain continued sliding down the carriage windows, turning the outside world into a blurry gray canvas. Soon, Klein returned carrying a bag. His trousers were slightly muddy and his clothes damp from the rain. Klein presents the items. "These are Elliot's clothes from yesterday, and this is the amulet he usually wears." Klein examined the items. Inside the bag was a miniature gentleman's outfit, a small shirt, vest, and bow tie. The amulet was bronze, engraved with symbols of wind and waves. Klein then began describing the events surrounding the kidnapping. He recounted the terrifying moments from that morning. Every detail was shared in hopes that it would help locate the boy. Klein and Leonard focused only on the essential facts: how many kidnappers, whether anything unusual had happened, and whether they were armed. The answers were simple: 3 kidnappers, nothing supernatural, and firearms were involved. After gathering the information they needed, Klein and Leonard left Klein. They hired a smaller carriage for the search.
Inside the carriage, Klein placed Elliot's clothes on the floor. He wrapped the bronze amulet around the handle of his cane. Then he held the cane upright above the clothes. Klein gathered his thoughts and let his breathing slow. His mind entered a half-meditative state. The world around him seemed to blur as his awareness drifted into the spirit realm. Silently, he repeated a single phrase. The words echoed again and again inside his mind. Elliot's location. When Klein released his grip, the cane did not fall. It stood upright in the moving carriage. Even as the vehicle rattled over uneven roads, the cane remained standing. Invisible currents stirred around him. For a moment, Klein felt as if unseen eyes were watching. He repeated the question once more within his thoughts. Then the cane tipped forward. It pointed straight ahead. Klein instructs. "Straight." Immediately, Leonard leaned toward the driver. Leonard commands. "Keep going forward. We'll tell you when to turn." The carriage continued through the city. Street after street passed beneath the wheels. Occasionally, Klein repeated the ritual to adjust their direction. At last, the carriage circled a particular building. The result remained the same. The missing boy was inside. Klein stepped out and repeated the divination once more. The cane tilted toward the staircase. Klein indicates the location. "There." Leonard watched the process with a smile. Leonard comments, "I envy old Neil sometimes, and now I envy you." Klein answered calmly, "Oh, it's not particularly difficult. With enough practice, you could learn it too." They entered the 3-story building quietly. The entrance of each floor opened directly beside the staircase. 2 apartments occupied each level. Klein repeated the divination on the 1st and 2nd floors. Each time, the cane pointed upward. The target was higher. He finally reached the 3rd floor. Klein placed the cane down again. A sudden breeze swept through the stairwell. His eyes darkened as the spirit world brushed against reality. The cane stood upright once more. Then it fell, pointing toward the door to the right. Klein confirms, "They're inside that room." Klein touched his forehead and activated his spiritual vision. Colorful auras appeared beyond the wall. 4 figures were inside. 3 of them were adults. The 4th aura was smaller. That had to be Elliot. Klein shared the information. 4 people inside. 3 kidnappers and 1 child. The numbers match. They're armed. Leonard's lips curled into a relaxed smile. He stepped forward toward the door. "Allow me to recite them a poem." His expression changed. The playful smile vanished, replaced by a quiet melancholy. Then his voice began to echo through the dim corridor. The words drifted slowly through the stairwell, a strange poem about fleeting life and inevitable endings. Each line carried a strange weight. The rain outside had almost stopped.
Inside the silent building, danger waited behind a single door, and the moment before confrontation hung heavy in the air.
Chapter 44: When Destiny Casts Its Shadow. Leonard's voice drifted through the hallway like a gentle lullaby. The melody slid beneath the door and echoed along the wooden stairwell. Klein felt his thoughts slow, as if a quiet lake had formed inside his mind. Moonlight and rippling water seemed to appear behind his closed eyelids. A heavy drowsiness pressed against him. It felt as though he might collapse into sleep while still standing. At the same time, he sensed something strange lingering behind him, an indistinct presence, cold and distant, as if something from the spirit world was watching. Suddenly, Klein's thoughts sharpened again. His familiarity with meditation and his heightened spiritual perception pulled him back from the haze. He had narrowly resisted the effect of Leonard's strange singing. Even so, his emotions remained muted, almost numb. Leonard stops singing and speaks casually. "I should ask the captain for permission to request a lute. A performance deserves proper music, doesn't it?" Leonard chuckles and continues. "Just kidding. The song did its job. They should all be asleep by now." Leonard stepped forward toward the closed door. Without hesitation, he twisted his shoulder and struck the lock with a powerful punch. Wood splintered with a sharp crack. Fragments of the frame scattered as the lock broke apart. Leonard remarks calmly, "That requires precise control." Leonard reached through the broken lock and pushed the door open. Klein, far less relaxed, pulled his revolver from underneath his coat. He checked the cylinder instinctively, ready to fire if necessary. Through the opening, Klein saw a man collapsed over a table. A firearm rested loosely near his feet. Another kidnapper stirred nearby, rubbing his eyes as if waking from a deep sleep. Leonard moved first. He lunged forward and struck the waking man before the kidnapper could fully stand. The blow landed cleanly. The man dropped unconscious to the floor. Just as Klein prepared to step inside, his instincts flared. He spun around toward the staircase. Footsteps were approaching from below. A man without a hat appeared on the stairs. He wore a brown coat and carried a paper bag filled with bread. The moment he noticed the gun aimed at him, he froze mid-step. Klein issues a warning. "Don't move. Raise your hands. I'll count down." The man forced a stiff smile. His gaze remained fixed on Klein's finger resting against the trigger. The stranger speaks cautiously. "Sir, there must be some mistake. Is this meant to be a joke?" Klein kept the revolver steady. His training sessions at the range flashed through his mind. For now, he treated the stranger as a potential threat. Klein answered firmly, "Do as you're told. Someone will decide whether this is a misunderstanding soon." Leonard appeared at the doorway behind Klein. He glanced toward the man on the stairs with mild curiosity. Leonard comments, "Looks like the kidnappers had someone responsible for bringing them food." The man's eyes widened. Without warning, he kicked the bread bag into the air. Loaves burst free, scattering through the stairwell in an attempt to block Klein's view. Klein didn't hesitate. He pulled the trigger. The revolver roared. A bullet tore into the man's shoulder. Blood sprayed across the stairwell as he collapsed. The wounded man tried to flee down the stairs. Leonard moved faster. He vaulted over the railing and dropped down from above. Leonard landed directly on the escaping man. The force knocked the accomplice unconscious instantly. Dust and blood scattered across the wooden floor. Leonard remarked approvingly, "Nice shot." Klein twitched slightly. He had actually been aiming for the man's leg. The smell of blood hung in the air. As Leonard searched the accomplice and confiscated a dagger, Klein reflected on what had just happened. His senses had warned him before the man appeared. Even without enhanced eyesight or hearing, he could detect hidden movement. Perhaps it was part of the Seer's spiritual awareness, a subtle perception that revealed things beyond ordinary senses. With gun and cane in hand, Klein entered the kidnapper's room. Inside, a frightened boy stirred awake. Elliot Vickroy slowly lifted his head. The kidnappers were already tied up. Leonard had used their own ropes against them. Where rope ran short, torn clothing served as bindings.
The young boys stared at the scene in confusion and hope. Elliot speaks nervously. "Who are you?" Leonard crouched beside him with a faint grin. "You guessed it correctly, very precise." Klein lowered his revolver. He spoke more clearly to reassure the child. Klein explains, "We're security personnel hired by your father. You can think of us as mercenaries." Elliot's eyes widened. His voice trembled with sudden joy. "Then, does that mean I'm safe?"
Leonard stood and stretched slightly. Then he turned toward Klein. Leonard gives instructions. "Go find some police officers and inform them. I'd rather not walk out of here carrying a child and 4 criminals." Klein nodded. He holstered his revolver and picked up his cane before heading downstairs. As he descended the staircase, he heard Leonard speaking cheerfully to the rescued boy. Leonard says casually, "Relax, you'll see your parents soon. Until then, how about a round of cards?" Suppressing a laugh, Klein stepped into the street. After asking several pedestrians for directions, he found 2 patrolling policemen. He explained the situation as a representative of the security company. One officer left to gather reinforcements and notify the Vickroy family. The other accompanied Klein back to the building. Nearly 40 minutes later, more carriages arrived. Klein stepped first. Behind him followed his employer, the anxious tobacco merchant. The man seemed unable to believe the news. The rescue had happened so quickly it felt unreal. As they arrived, a 2-wheeled carriage rolled past the street. Leonard leaned out of the window and snapped his fingers playfully. Inside the carriage, Leonard extended his hand toward Klein. "It was enjoyable working with you." Klein shook his hand. Klein glanced out the window before speaking again. "We shouldn't confirm the details with Klein, otherwise the police might take credit for everything." Leonard shrugged lightly. "Don't worry about it. Money isn't everything." Klein forced a polite smile. For him, the reward mattered very much. Later that evening, Klein returned home. Dinner passed peacefully with casual conversation among the siblings. A worker came briefly to collect a small payment for the gas meter. Eventually, the house grew quiet. Darkness settled across the rooms. In the middle of the night, Klein awoke. Something felt wrong. He stepped into the unused bedroom nearby. A gray desk stood silently against the wall. On top of it lay a black notebook. Klein approached slowly and opened the cover. The page revealed an illustration of a mysterious figure in elaborate attire, the Fool. Below the image was a sentence written in ancient script, a chilling message about death. And then Klein noticed something impossible. The Fool in the picture was smiling. Klein jerked awake in his own bed. Crimson moonlight filtered through the curtains. The nightmare faded, but the unease remained. As a seer, Klein understood that dreams often carried meaning. He retraced the day's events carefully. Then he froze. During Leonard's song earlier, he had felt something watching him, a strange, indifferent presence, a feeling disturbingly similar to something he had encountered before. The realization struck him suddenly. That sensation of being observed, it was the same presence connected to the mysterious notebook, and somewhere in the shadows, that cursed object had appeared again. Chapter 45. Returning to the hidden trace. The realization struck Klein like a spark in the dark. The mysterious notebook, it had been there all along. According to the instinct that rose from his dream, the cursed Antigonus notebook was located in the apartment opposite the kidnapper's room. The thought jolted him fully awake. Klein sprang from his bed and hurriedly began dressing. His hands moved quickly as he grabbed a clean white shirt and pulled it over his shoulders. But in his rush, something felt wrong. When he reached the last buttons, the shirt refused to align properly. The left and right sides didn't match. After a second look, Klein realized he had fastened the first button incorrectly, twisting the entire shirt. He paused and shook his head. Taking a slow breath, he used the meditation technique he had practiced countless times. Gradually, the tension draining from his body as calm returned. Once dressed properly in his shirt and trousers, he strapped on the armpit holster. From beneath his pillow, he retrieved the revolver and secured it inside the holster. There was no time to adjust a bow tie. Klein grabbed his coat, cane, and hat. Quietly, he stepped into the corridor and closed his bedroom door behind him. Moving softly down the stairs, he tried not to wake anyone. Before leaving, he wrote a short note on a piece of paper. It explained that he had to leave early for work that morning. After placing it in the living room, Klein slipped out into the street.
Cool air brushed against his face. The street was nearly empty, lit only by gas lamps and faint moonlight. When Klein checked his pocket watch, the time showed 6 in the morning. The crimson moon still lingered in the sky, but along the horizon, the faint glow of sunrise had begun to appear. Just as he was about to look for a carriage, something unexpected arrived. A large public carriage approached along the quiet road. Klein stared at it in mild confusion. He had not expected public transport to run so early. Klein greets the driver. "Good morning. I'd like to go to Zottelin Street." The driver halted the horses skillfully. Beside him, the ticket officer yawned tiredly. The fare was quickly calculated. Klein climbed on board. To his surprise, the carriage was empty. The lonely interior echoed faintly as the wheels began rolling. As the horses trotted forward, Klein struck up a short conversation with the driver. The driver explained their long shifts and modest pay. Even the horses required rest between routes. Gradually, the sky brightened. Several passengers boarded along the route. Eventually, the carriage reached Zottelin Street. Klein jumped down from the carriage. Without wasting time, he entered the building that housed Blackthorn Security Company. The door upstairs was still closed. Using his key, Klein unlocked the door and stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, but someone was already awake. Leonard greets him casually. "Honestly, I prefer cigars, but these cigarettes are fashionable lately. You look like you're in a hurry." Klein ignored the comment. He had something far more urgent to say. Klein asks urgently, "Where's the captain?" Leonard pointed toward the office beyond the partition. As a sleepless beyonder, Dunn Smith required very little rest. He was already awake. Klein moved through the partition. At the office doorway stood Dunn Smith. The captain watched him with calm seriousness. Dunn asks firmly, "What happened?" Klein quickly summarized everything: the déjà vu, the dream, and the realization that the Antigonist notebook might be in the apartment opposite the kidnapper's room. Leonard, who had followed behind, chuckled softly. "Looks like I missed the chance to make a major contribution." Dunn remained silent for a moment. Then he began issuing orders.
Dunn gives instructions. Have Kenley replace Old Neil at the armory. Tell Old Neil and Fry to come with us. Within minutes, the team gathered. Soon, a carriage under the Nighthawks' jurisdiction departed through the quiet streets. Leonard handled the reins as driver. Inside the carriage sat Klein and Old Neil on one side. Across from them were Dunn Smith and Fry. The corpse collector's pale skin and cold demeanor gave him an unsettling presence. Dunn asked Klein to repeat every detail of the previous day. Klein carefully described the rescue mission, the dream, and the strange feeling of being observed. Old Neil listened with a soft chuckle. Your fate seems oddly connected to that notebook. Klein could not deny the strange coincidence. Everything seemed too perfectly aligned, yet no evidence suggested the kidnapping itself had anything to do with supernatural forces. The carriage soon reached the building where the kidnapping had occurred. The team stepped out together. Dunn took the lead. He reminded the group to move carefully. Klein and Old Neil followed behind. One by one, they climbed the stairs toward the 3rd floor. When they reached the hallway, Leonard pointed toward the apartment opposite the kidnapper's room. This one? Klein activated his spirit vision. The door felt strangely familiar. He nodded slowly. Old Neil checked the surroundings through spiritual perception. He reported no magical traces. Fry also confirmed there were no evil spirits present. Leonard stepped forward. With the same brutal efficiency as before, he smashed the lock with a punch. This time, the entire mechanism broke apart. The instant the door opened, an invisible barrier seemed to disappear. A powerful stench flooded into the hallway. The smell of decay was overwhelming. Fry states calmly, "A corpse, and it's been rotting." Dunn slowly pushed the door open. Inside the apartment, heat filled the air despite the summer season. Near the chimney stood a rocking chair. Seated in that chair was an old woman. Her body was swollen and discolored. Her skin had turned a sickly shade of green and black. Maggots crawled through the folds of the decaying flesh. The stench of decomposition filled the room. In spirit vision, the parasites flickered like strange moving lights. Suddenly, the corpse shifted slightly. Both of the woman's eyeballs dropped from their sockets. They rolled across the floor, leaving trails behind them.
The sight was too much. Klein bent forward abruptly. The nauseating smell and grotesque scene overwhelmed him. The air inside the apartment felt heavy with something unseen. Even after years of decay, the silence of the room seemed unnatural, and somewhere within that foul darkness, the trail of the cursed notebook continued.
We'll continue this journey in the next episode. This episode is an original retelling inspired by a popular web novel.